Have you ever felt a sudden, sharp pain? A cold surprise that made your heart stop? A moment when the world you knew suddenly turned upside down? When your own family, the people you trusted most, did something so unthinkable, so deeply hurtful, it changed you forever. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. The sun was warm, the ocean sparkled, and the ship was about to leave. My family was on board. I was standing on the dock. They left me there. They did not know, of course, that I owned the travel agency. Before we jump back in, tell us where you are tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe, because tomorrow I have saved something truly special just for you. My name is Evelyn. I am a woman past the age of 40, and for many years, my life felt like a quiet, comfortable painting. I lived in a lovely home with a garden I adored. Each morning, I would wake before the sun, make a warm cup of tea, and sit by the window. I watched the first light touch the leaves of my old oak tree. This was my ritual, a moment of peace before the day began. My husband, Robert, was a kind man, steady and predictable. We had been married for many years, and our life together felt like a familiar song. We had 2 grown children, Sarah and David. Sarah was a gentle soul, thoughtful and artistic. David was more outgoing, always ready for an adventure. They had their own lives now, but we spoke often. Family dinners on Sundays were a tradition. We would gather around the large wooden table, sharing stories and laughter. It was a picture of a happy family, full of love and connection. I worked at a travel agency. It was my passion. I loved helping people plan their dream vacations, finding the perfect cruise or the quietest beach. My colleagues were like a second family. We worked hard, but we also shared many jokes and coffee breaks. My days were full. I would come home, tired but content. I cooked simple, healthy meals. Robert and I would talk about our day. Sometimes we would watch an old movie. Life felt good. It felt safe. I had my routines, my family, my work. I believed I understood my world completely. I believed I knew the people in it, especially those closest to me. There were small challenges, of course, as there are in every life. A leaking faucet, a car trouble, a disagreement about dinner plans. These were normal things. They were small, waves on a calm ocean. I did not imagine that a storm was coming. I did not see the large, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. My life felt perfectly normal, perfectly ordered. I had no reason to think otherwise. The first small crack appeared in our family's usual rhythm. It was a subtle thing, almost imperceptible at first, like a tiny whisper carried on the wind. Robert began to spend more time on his phone. It was not unusual for him to work or check emails, but this felt different. He would hold the phone close to his chest, his back often turned to me. When I asked him about it, he would offer a quick, vague answer. "Just work," he would say, or looking at news. His voice would be a little too casual. Then came the hushed conversations. I would sometimes walk into a room and find Robert, Sarah, and David speaking in low tones. When they saw me, they would stop abruptly. A sudden silence would fill the air, thick and uncomfortable. They would try to act natural, but I could feel the tension, a strange barrier suddenly appearing between us. Sarah would quickly pick up a book. David would pretend to be interested in something on television. Robert would clear his throat and change the subject. One evening, I heard a part of a conversation from the kitchen. It was David's voice. He was talking about the trip. He said something about keeping it a secret. My heart gave a little jump. We had been planning a family cruise for months. It was a big trip, a dream vacation we had saved for. We had talked about it openly, excitedly. Why would he say, keeping it a secret? When I walked into the room, David quickly changed the topic to the weather, I tried to shake off the feeling. Perhaps it was just my imagination. Perhaps they were planning a surprise for me, a small birthday celebration during the cruise. I told myself to relax, but the feeling persisted, a quiet hum of unease in the back of my mind. Robert's eyes would sometimes avoid mine. Sarah would offer quick, forced smiles. David seemed to be hiding something in his laughter. I wanted to ask directly, but a strange fear held me back. I did not want to cause a problem. I did not want to imagine something that was not there. Yet, the feeling grew stronger. I could feel something changing. A shift was happening, slow and unsettling. The subtle changes continued, day by day, making me feel increasingly confused. It was like trying to read a book where some pages were missing. I knew there was a story, but I could not make sense of it. My family, usually so open with me, now seemed to be communicating in whispers and glances. They would sometimes forget I was even in the room, their eyes meeting in silent understanding over my head. I felt like an outsider in my own home, a visitor observing a scene she did not fully comprehend. I would watch Robert's face. He seemed preoccupied, his brow often furrowed in thought. When I asked him what was wrong, he would simply say, "Nothing. Evelyn, just a lot on my mind with work." But I knew him. I knew the subtle changes in his expression, the way his lips would tighten when he was holding back something important. His assurances felt hollow, like polite words without true meaning. Sarah, my daughter, usually shared everything with me. We had always been close, sharing secrets and dreams. Now, when I tried to talk to her, her answers were short. She would look away. I asked her about the cruise, hoping to spark some excitement, some return to our shared plans. She spoke about it, yes, but her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. Her eyes seemed to carry a hidden sadness, or perhaps it was worry. I could not tell which. David, my son, was usually so straightforward. He was less guarded, but even he seemed to be part of this silent pact. He would avoid my gaze if I looked at him for too long. Sometimes, I would catch him about to say something. Then he would stop himself, a quick look passing between him and his father or sister. This unspoken agreement, this secret language they all shared, made my stomach ache. I spent many nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of conversation, the uneasy silences, the strange looks. Was I overthinking? Was I imagining things because I was feeling stressed about something else? I tried to find a logical reason for their behavior, a reason that did not involve me being excluded. But the more I thought, the deeper the confusion grew. A knot formed in my chest, a heavy, unsettling feeling. I did not understand what was happening, and the not knowing was the hardest part. The confusion I felt was a heavy blanket wrapped around me, but underneath it, a tiny flame of hope still flickered. I wanted so desperately to trust them, to believe that there was a simple, innocent explanation for everything. My family was my anchor, the very core of my existence. The idea that they might be intentionally keeping something from me, something significant, was almost unbearable. I pushed away the creeping doubts, choosing instead to focus on the long history of love and shared moments we had. Robert, my husband, had always been my rock. He was the one I turned to for comfort, for advice, for reassurance. Our life together had been built on honesty and mutual respect. I remembered countless times he had supported me, held my hand through difficult moments, and celebrated my successes. How could such a man, the father of my children, suddenly become a stranger, someone who kept secrets from me? It did not make sense. My heart truly did not want it to make sense. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Robert was reading the newspaper, and I was trying to focus on a book. The silence between us, however, was not peaceful. It felt stretched, thin, almost fragile. I decided to make an effort, a direct, honest effort, to bridge the gap that seemed to be growing. "Robert," I began, my voice soft. "Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied lately." He lowered the newspaper, his eyes meeting mine for a moment, then quickly darting away. "Of course, Evelyn. Everything is fine. Just a lot of demands at work, you know how it is." He offered a small, reassuring smile, but it did not quite reach his eyes. His hand, which was resting on his knee, was tapping a nervous rhythm. This was not the calm, steady Robert I knew. This was a man trying to convince me, and perhaps himself, that all was well, when clearly it was not. Still, I wanted to believe. Him. I wanted to cling to the familiar image of my trustworthy husband. I thought about Sarah and David. They were my children, my flesh and blood. I had raised them with love, teaching them the importance of honesty and open communication. Sarah, with her gentle nature, had always been sensitive to my feelings. David, with his straightforward personality, usually spoke his mind. The thought of them conspiring, even in a small way, against me, their mother, was painful. It was a thought I refused to entertain fully. I reminded myself of their childhood, the little secrets they would keep, like planning a surprise birthday party for a friend, or saving up for a special gift. Perhaps this was something similar. A well-intentioned surprise, a small secret meant to bring joy. That idea offered a sliver of comfort, a warm sensation against the cold chill of doubt. It was a possibility, a hopeful one. So, I tried to convince myself. I tried to push away the subtle signs, the quiet conversations, the averted gazes. I tried to interpret their actions in the most positive light possible. I told myself that my imagination was simply running wild. My worries were just worries, not facts. I wanted to trust them, to believe in the strength of our family bonds. I wanted to believe that the love we shared was too strong, too real, for any secret to truly break it. This desire to trust, to hold on to the familiar comfort of my family, was a powerful force within me. It made me ignore the growing whispers of my own instinct, the quiet voice deep inside that told me something was indeed wrong. I kept telling myself, "They love you. They would never hurt you." This was my hope, my fragile shield against the unsettling truth that was slowly, inevitably, revealing itself. The desire to trust, to hold on to the familiar, was a powerful current, but beneath it, another current was beginning to stir. A feeling of unease, a quiet warning. It was not a loud noise, not a direct shout, but more like a soft hum, a persistent vibration in the air around me. This warning did not come from an obvious source, not from a direct conversation with a friend, at least not yet. Instead, it emerged from within, from my own deep instinct, and from small, almost unnoticed details that began to add up. One afternoon, I was at the travel agency, helping a client plan her dream vacation to Italy. We were looking at beautiful pictures of Florence and Rome. Suddenly, my colleague Maria walked past my desk. Maria was a warm woman, a little older than I, with wise eyes and a calm demeanor. We had worked together for many years, sharing lunches and stories about our lives. As she passed, her usual cheerful expression was absent. She paused, then looked at me, a thoughtful, almost concerned look on her face. "Evelyn," she said, her voice a little softer than usual, "are you feeling all right? You seem a little distracted these days." I forced a smile, trying to appear normal. "Oh, I am perfectly fine, Maria. Just a busy week, you know." Maria did not smile back. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment, longer than necessary. "Remember to take care of yourself, Evelyn," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes we focus so much on others, we forget to see what is happening right in front of us, or even inside us." She then walked away, leaving me with her words hanging in the air. Her warning was subtle, but it resonated deeply. Maria knew me well. She knew my habits, my expressions, my usual energy. Her observation, made with such quiet sincerity, was not just a casual comment. It felt like a subtle nudge, a gentle push to pay attention. It made me wonder what she might have noticed, what unspoken signals I was sending out. Later that week, a small incident occurred at home that further amplified this internal alarm. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I overheard Robert talking on the phone in his study. The door was slightly ajar. He was speaking in a hushed tone, something he rarely did unless discussing business matters he considered very private. I heard him say, "Yes, she absolutely cannot know. Not yet." Then a pause. "It is better this way, believe me, for everyone's sake." A cold wave washed over me. She. He was talking about me. Cannot know. This was not about a surprise party. This was about something else, something hidden, something they did not want me to discover. My heart began to pound a little faster. The hope I had clung to, the belief that it was an innocent secret, began to crumble. The fragments of conversations, the averted gazes, the sudden silences, they all began to coalesce into a more troubling picture. My instinct, that quiet voice inside me, grew louder. It was no longer a whisper. It was a clear, insistent feeling. It told me that the confusion I felt was not imagined. It told me that the subtle shifts in my family's behavior were not innocent. It told me that the careful smiles and vague answers were a shield, protecting a secret that involved me directly, a secret that was not meant to bring me joy. I remembered my mother's old saying, "Always trust your gut feeling, Evelyn. It rarely lies." I had always believed in it. Now, my gut feeling was screaming a warning. It was a quiet warning, but it was powerful. It told me that the ground beneath my feet was not as solid as I had believed. It told me that I needed to open my eyes, truly open them, and see what was truly there, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. The feeling was chilling, yet oddly empowering. It was time to stop ignoring what my heart already knew. The warning, though clear, was something I desperately wished to silence. It was a siren in the distance, growing louder, but I still held on to the hope that it was merely a passing ship, not a sign of impending danger. My mind, usually so rational and organized, became a battlefield where logic fought with emotion. The logical part of me saw the accumulating evidence, Robert's evasiveness, the hushed conversations, Maria's gentle caution. The emotional part of me, however, refused to accept it. It clung to the comforting illusion of our perfect family, our unbreakable bond. I tried to ignore the growing unease. I busied myself with my work, immersing myself in cruise itineraries and flight schedules. I spent extra hours at the travel agency, finding solace in the predictable patterns of my professional life. There, I was in control. There, the conversations were direct and the intentions clear. It was a welcome escape from the unsettling atmosphere at home. My colleagues noticed my extended hours, but I simply told them I had a lot of work to do, which was partly true. It was easier to explain extra work than to admit the creeping dread in my heart. At home, I adopted a strategy of deliberate distraction. I focused intensely on domestic tasks. I cleaned the house with unusual vigor, polishing surfaces until they gleamed, organizing cupboards that were already tidy. I spent hours in my garden, pruning roses and planting new flowers, losing myself in the rhythm of the earth. Each time a thought of Robert's strange behavior or Sarah and David's hushed tones threatened to surface, I would push it down, replace it with a task, a chore, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even tried to initiate more normal family activities. I suggested board game nights, which we had not done in a long time. I cooked elaborate dinners, hoping that the shared act of eating and talking would bring back the old comfort. Robert, Sarah, and David participated, but their engagement felt forced. Their smiles did not quite reach their eyes, and the laughter felt a little hollow. The conversations often veered away from anything personal, staying on safe, general topics like the news or a television show. It was like watching actors play a scene, rather than experiencing real family connection. During these interactions, I would often catch myself observing them, searching for clues, for an explanation. But then, I would immediately scold myself. "Stop it, Evelyn," I would think. "You are being paranoid. You are imagining things." I told myself that perhaps they were stressed about their own lives, their own private concerns, and I was simply misinterpreting their quietness. Perhaps Robert was facing a difficult challenge at work that he did not want to burden me with. Perhaps Sarah and David were dealing with their own worries, and their reserve was simply a natural response. I tried to construct these innocent scenarios in my mind, building walls of denial around the painful possibility of betrayal. Sleep became difficult. My nights were restless, filled with fragmented dreams and a persistent low-level anxiety. I would wake up feeling more tired than when I went to bed, yet, even in the quiet of the night, when doubts were hardest to suppress, I would cling to the idea that everything was fine. I would repeat to myself like a mantra, "It is nothing. You are overreacting. They love you." This internal battle was exhausting. Part of me knew the truth was knocking, gently but persistently, at the door of my awareness. But another part of me, the part that craved stability and familiarity, desperately wanted to keep that door shut. I tried to ignore the warning, to bury it under layers of denial and distraction, hoping that if I did not acknowledge it, it would simply disappear. I hoped that the calm painting of my life would reform itself, erasing the cracks that were slowly, but surely, beginning to show. The subtle attempts to ignore the growing unease slowly began to fail. It was impossible to perpetually distract myself from the shifting emotional landscape of my home. The silence became heavier, the forced smiles more noticeable, and the feeling of being an outsider, an observer to my own life, grew stronger. The most unsettling change, however, was in Robert. It was not just what he said or did not say, but the way he looked at me, or rather, the way he avoided looking at me. Robert had always had a direct, loving gaze. His eyes, a warm hazel, would meet mine with an open honesty. Now, his eyes seemed to dance around me, settling on anything but my face. When we spoke, he would look at the wall, at the floor, out the window, anywhere to avoid sustained eye contact. It was as if my gaze carried a question he was unwilling to answer, or perhaps a truth he was afraid I would see in his own reflection. One morning, as we sat at the breakfast table, a rare moment of quiet stillness enveloped the room. I reached across the table to pour him more coffee. As I did, my hand brushed against his. He flinched, pulling his hand back quickly, as if my touch had burned him. His eyes flickered to mine for a fraction of a second, and in that fleeting glance, I saw something I had never seen before. A flicker of guilt, a shadow of discomfort, and something else. A strange, distant coldness. It was gone almost immediately, replaced by a hurried, almost aggressive focus on his plate. That look, that brief, unsettling glimpse into an emotion I did not recognize in him, lingered with me throughout the day. It was not the look of a man who was simply tired or stressed. It was the look of a man who was carrying a burden, a secret he was desperate to keep hidden, even from me. The warmth that had always been present in his eyes, the deep affection that had been the foundation of our life together, seemed to have diminished, replaced by this unsettling coolness. When Sarah and David were present, Robert's gaze towards me would soften slightly, almost as if he was putting on a performance for their benefit. He would offer a more convincing smile, a more familiar tone in his voice. But the moment they left the room, the distant quality would return. The barrier would re-establish itself. I felt as though I was living with a stranger who wore the face of my husband. The silence that now filled our home was not comforting. It was heavy, laden with unspoken words and hidden meanings. I found myself watching Robert constantly, trying to decipher his expressions, to understand the shift in his eyes. Was it anger, resentment, or was it fear? The fear of me discovering something he wished to conceal. I remembered a time when we could communicate without words, when a shared glance was enough to convey understanding or affection. Now, his glances felt like barriers, carefully constructed to keep me out. The very way he moved around me, the slight tilt of his head away when I spoke, the way his shoulders seemed to tense when I approached. All these subtle changes spoke volumes. They screamed a warning that no amount of distraction or denial could drown out. My heart ached with a deep, quiet pain. The man I loved, the man I trusted implicitly, was now looking at me in a way that suggested I was either a problem, a threat, or someone to be carefully managed. The trust I had so desperately clung to began to erode, slowly but surely, with every averted gaze, every fleeting glimpse of that cold, unfamiliar discomfort in his eyes. I could no longer ignore it. The way he looked at me had become a loud, insistent message, and it told me that the normal life I had known was irrevocably breaking apart. The unsettling gaze, the evasive behavior, the growing weight of unspoken secrets, it all became too much to bear. The quiet pain that had settled in my chest began to throb, demanding a resolution. I could no longer live in this atmosphere of vague suspicion and half-truths. I needed to know. I needed to hear it, whatever it was, from Robert's own lips. The suspense was worse than any potential truth. I chose my moment carefully. It was a Saturday morning, a rare time when Sarah and David were both out of the house. Robert was in his study, going through some papers. The house was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This conversation, I knew, could change everything. I walked to the study door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the knob. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice, trying to prepare myself for whatever response I might receive. I pushed the door open gently. Robert looked up from his desk, startled. His eyes, for a split second, held that familiar flicker of guilt before he quickly composed himself, replacing it with a semblance of polite inquiry. "Evelyn, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I walked into the room, standing opposite his desk. I kept my voice calm, steady, though inside, I was shaking. "Robert," I began, my gaze firm, meeting his. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes moving to the papers on his desk. "I need to ask you something important. Something that has been troubling me greatly." He cleared his throat. "Of course, Evelyn. What is it?" He still did not meet my eyes directly. "What is going on?" I asked directly, my voice gaining a little more strength. "For weeks now, things have felt different. You have been distant. The children have been quiet. There are hushed conversations, strange looks. I hear bits of things like the trip and keeping it a secret. What is this secret, Robert? What are you, Sarah, and David hiding from me?" He leaned back in his chair, his posture stiff. He picked up a pen from his desk and began to click it. A small, irritating sound in the quiet room. His face was a mask, carefully constructed to show no emotion. "Evelyn, there is nothing to hide. You are imagining things. We have just been busy. Work has been stressful for all of us. Do not tell me I am imagining things," I insisted, my voice rising slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. "I am not foolish. I feel it. I see it. The way you look at me, Robert. The way you avoid my eyes. Something is happening. And you are not telling me. Why? Why are you doing this?" He put the pen down, his hand flat on the desk. He finally looked at me, but his gaze was not comforting. It was guarded, almost defensive. "Evelyn, there are some details about the cruise that are still being finalized. We did not want to bother you with them. It is simply a matter of logistics. Nothing more." His explanation felt thin, transparent. "Logistics?" I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. "This feels like more than logistics, Robert. This feels like a wall you are building between us. Why are you keeping me out?" He sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Look, Evelyn, it is for your own good. We just want to make sure everything is perfect for you. We are planning a wonderful trip. Please, just trust us. Do not worry about it." "Trust you?" I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. "How can I trust you when you refuse to be honest with me? When you tell me I am imagining my own feelings? When you treat me like a child who cannot handle the truth?" He stood up, his voice growing firmer, a dismissive tone entering his words. "Evelyn, I have told you everything. There is nothing else. Now I have work to do." He turned his back to me, signaling the end of the conversation. My heart sank. He had avoided it. He had not given me a straight answer. He had pushed me away, dismissed my feelings, and refused to acknowledge the obvious tension. The doubt that had been a quiet whisper now became a loud, insistent roar in my ears. He was not telling me the truth, and his refusal to answer only deepened the chasm that was forming between us. I stood there for a moment, staring at his unyielding back, the heavy silence filling the room. My mind reeled. I could not stop thinking. His dismissal, his cold refusal to engage with my pain, reverberated through me long after I left his study. I walked aimlessly through the house, the familiar rooms now feeling alien and unwelcoming. Each piece of furniture, each photograph, seemed to mock me with memories of a supposed happiness that now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. The silence of the house, once a comfort, became a vast, echoing space, filled with my unanswered questions and the crushing weight of unspoken truths. I tried to go about my usual evening routine. I prepared a light dinner, but the food tasted like ash in my mouth. I sat at the dining table, alone, picking at my plate, my appetite completely gone. Every bite felt like a betrayal to my own self, a continuation of the charade that everything was normal. Robert remained in his study, and I did not hear a sound from him. Sarah and David still had not returned home. The isolation felt immense, a heavy cloak draped over my shoulders. My mind became a relentless, churning machine. I replayed every conversation, every interaction from the past few weeks. Robert's evasive answers, Sarah's downcast eyes, David's quick changes of subject, Maria's gentle warning, the fleeting look of guilt in Robert's eyes. It all clicked into place, not as separate incidents, but as pieces of a disturbing puzzle. The innocent explanations I had so desperately tried to conjure now seemed laughably naive. I had wanted to believe. I had tried so hard to believe. But the evidence was overwhelming. I remembered small details I had dismissed earlier. A brochure for a different cruise line, not the one we had discussed, tucked away in Robert's briefcase. A hurried phone call Sarah had taken outside, her voice barely a whisper. David's unusual interest in passport renewal dates, even though ours were perfectly valid. Each memory, once benign, now carried a sinister undertone. Sleep, which had already been a struggle, became impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness amplifying my thoughts. My mind raced, jumping from one terrifying possibility to another. Was it about money? Was he in trouble? Was it something even worse? Something about our marriage? The idea that my husband, my partner for decades, could be intentionally deceiving me, keeping a significant secret with our children, was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt like a deep cut, and the wound refused to close. Tears welled up, hot and unwelcome. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth to stifle the sobs that threatened to escape. I did not want Robert to hear me. I did not want him to know the depth of my hurt, the extent of my distress. I needed to maintain some semblance of composure, even if it was just for myself. Crying felt like an admission of defeat, a surrender to the confusion that was consuming me. The feeling of emotional isolation was profound. I could not talk to Robert. I could not talk to Sarah or David, because they were part of the secret. My usual confidant, Maria, had already given her subtle warning, and I felt a strange shame in confessing how truly lost I felt. I was alone with my thoughts, trapped in a relentless cycle of suspicion and hurt. The trust I had placed in my family, a trust that had been the bedrock of my life, was crumbling. And the more I thought, the more the pieces fit together into a picture that I did not want to see, a picture of betrayal. The night stretched on, long and dark, filled only with the relentless echo of my own overthinking. The sleepless night bled into a gray, heavy morning. The relentless cycle of my thoughts had left me utterly exhausted, yet I could not rest. My body felt heavy, my eyes burned, but my mind was still racing, caught in a loop of unanswered questions and bitter realizations. The vibrant colors of my home seemed muted, the familiar sounds distant. Everything felt covered in a thin veil of sadness. I did not go to work that day. I called in sick, a rare occurrence for me. My voice sounded flat and lifeless even to my own ears. Maria, my colleague, offered her sympathies, but I could hear a hint of concern in her tone. She probably knew I was not just sick with a cold. She probably sensed the emotional weight in my voice. I mumbled something about a headache and hung up, retreating further into my shell of quiet despair. The house felt too large, too empty. I wandered from room to room, a ghost in my own life. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the tick-tock of the old grandfather clock in the hall, each second marking another moment of my profound unhappiness. I did not feel angry yet. Anger felt too energetic, too demanding. What I felt was a deep, quiet pain, a sorrow that settled deep in my bones, cold and heavy. I found myself drawn to the window in the living room. Outside, the sky was overcast, a soft, steady rain beginning to fall. The drops splattered gently against the glass, tracing paths like tears. It felt like the sky was crying with me, mirroring the landscape of my soul. I sat down on the armchair, pulling my knees to my chest. Wrapping my arms around myself as if to hold my broken pieces together, I watched the rain. It fell on my beloved garden, washing the leaves clean, making the earth dark and rich. Normally, I would find beauty in this, a sense of renewal. Today, it simply deepened the melancholic mood. Each drop seemed to whisper of loss, of something vital being washed away. Tears, which I had tried so hard to suppress the night before, now flowed freely. They were not dramatic, sobbing tears, but quiet tears that streamed down my face, hot and silent. They felt cleansing, a slow release of the pressure that had built inside me. I did not make a sound. I just sat there, watching the rain, letting the tears fall. It was a moment of complete emotional surrender, a raw acknowledgement of the hurt I was experiencing. I thought about my family, the faces I loved so much, and the pain sharpened. How could they? How could they deliberately exclude me, the person who had given them so much, who loved them unconditionally, the image of our family, the Sunday dinners, the shared laughter, now felt tainted, covered in a layer of deceit. It was not just the secret itself, but the act of keeping it, the conscious choice to hide something from me, that caused the most profound ache. It was a breach of trust, a tear in the fabric of our relationship that felt impossible to mend. The realization that I was truly alone in this pain, that the very people who should have been my comfort were the source of my distress, was suffocating. There was no one to talk to, no one to share this crushing burden with, without revealing the painful truth about my own family. And I was not ready to do that. Not yet. So I sat by the window, a silent witness to the rain, a silent victim of a quiet betrayal. The hours passed slowly, marked only by the rhythm of the falling rain and the silent flow of my tears. It was a day of profound sadness, a day when the world felt muted, and the only color was the deep, aching blue of sorrow. This quiet pain was a heavy weight, pressing down on my spirit, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to simply exist. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I needed an answer. The day of quiet pain and silent tears eventually gave way to a night of restless agitation. I could no longer tolerate the ambiguity, the heavy cloak of secrets that suffocated me. The quiet pain had transformed into a burning need for clarity, a desperate craving for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I understood now that I could not simply wait for them to reveal whatever it was they were hiding. I had to demand it. The power was no longer in their hands to decide when, or if, I would know. I decided that the confrontation would happen the next morning. I needed to face them, not just Robert, but Sarah and David as well. This was not just about my husband's actions. It was about the family unit, about the children I had raised, who were now seemingly complicit in this deception. I spent the remaining hours of the night preparing myself, not for battle, but for a stern, unwavering demand for honesty. I mentally rehearsed what I would say, strengthening my resolve, steeling myself against any evasions or attempts to dismiss my feelings again. When morning arrived, I felt a strange calm. It was not a peaceful calm, but a resolute one, born of sheer exhaustion and a powerful need for resolution. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made me feel strong and composed, not vulnerable. I wanted them to see that I was not a fragile woman to be easily misled or ignored. Robert was already at the breakfast table when I entered the kitchen. Sarah and David joined us a few minutes later, their usual morning chatter noticeably subdued. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable weight that made even the clinking of cutlery sound unnaturally loud. I poured myself a cup of tea, my hands steady, a stark contrast to the trembling I had felt just days before. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk," I stated, my voice clear and firm, cutting through the strained silence. All three of them looked up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and apprehension. Robert's eyes flickered with that familiar guilt, but this time I met his gaze directly, holding it until he looked away. "This cannot continue," I went on, addressing all of them but keeping my eyes on Robert. The secrets, the whispers, the avoidance. "I know something is happening, something you are deliberately hiding from me. I deserve to know the truth. All of it." Sarah looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushing. David fidgeted in his seat. Robert cleared his throat. "Evelyn, I explained this already. There is nothing to hide. Just some details about the trip." Do not insult my intelligence, Robert, I said, my voice rising slightly, but still controlled. This is not about logistics. This is about trust. This is about honesty. The way you have all been behaving, the way you have deliberately excluded me from something significant. It is deeply hurtful. I am asking you for the last time to tell me the truth. What is going on with the cruise? Why are you acting this way? There was a heavy, painful silence. Robert looked from Sarah to David, a silent plea passing between them. Sarah still would not meet my eyes. David shifted uncomfortably, his usual bravado gone. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. Evelyn, please, try to understand. We were trying to protect you. We thought it was for the best. Protect me from what? I pressed, my voice unwavering. Protect me from the truth? That is not protection, Robert. That is deceit. I want to know. Now. The silence stretched, long and agonizing. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. My gaze moved between the three of them, searching their faces for any sign of honesty, any hint of remorse. Robert's face was still a careful mask, but beneath it, I could sense his internal struggle. Sarah's eyes were glistening, but she remained silent. David's jaw was tight. The painful silence in the room was louder than any shouts could have been. It spoke volumes. It confirmed my deepest fears. And in that silence, I felt a terrible certainty growing. I knew I was about to understand. The silence after my demand for the truth was deafening, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down upon us. I watched their faces, desperate for a sign, a crack in their carefully constructed facade. Robert's eyes darted from Sarah to David, a silent, frantic communication passing between them. Sarah kept her head down, her shoulders hunched, as if trying to shrink away from my gaze. David stared fixedly at a spot on the wall, his jaw tight. It was clear they were struggling, caught in their own web of complicity and fear. Finally, Robert let out a long, weary sigh. It sounded like the air escaping a deflated balloon. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw not anger, but a deep, profound weariness, mixed with something akin to shame. The guarded mask he had worn for weeks finally slipped. Evelyn, he began, his voice barely above, a whisper, hesitant, as if each word was a heavy stone. There is something we need to tell you about the cruise. It is not what you think. My heart hammered against my ribs. Go on, I urged, my voice surprisingly steady. Despite the tremor running through my body, I wanted it out. I needed it out. He took another breath, then spoke, slowly, deliberately. The travel agency. Your agency. It has been struggling, Evelyn. More than you know. For a long time. My mind reeled. What did the agency have to do with the cruise? I owned the agency. It was my passion, my life's work. It had always been profitable, stable. What are you talking about, Robert? The agency is fine. We have had a successful year. He shook his head, a pained expression on his face. No, Evelyn, it is not fine. There have been significant financial difficulties, losses, and the cruise, the one we planned together. It was part of a different arrangement. My mind raced, trying to connect these disparate pieces of information. Financial difficulties? Losses? This was news to me. I was the owner. I received regular reports. None of them indicated any significant problems. What arrangement? I asked, my voice now tight with a growing sense of dread. Sarah, her voice small and broken, finally spoke without lifting her head. Mom, we were trying to help. Dad said the agency was losing money badly, He said you would lose everything. David, his voice rough, added, he said this cruise was a way to fix it, a new investment, that it was a special arrangement only for us. Robert nodded, avoiding my eyes again. Yes. I made a deal, Evelyn. A new partnership. They agreed to buy out a significant portion of the agency, and part of the agreement was that this family cruise would be a launch, a way to show the new direction. The words hit me like a physical blow. Buy out a significant portion, my agency, without my knowledge? My voice was barely a gasp. And what about the cruise? What about us going on it? Robert's next words delivered the final, devastating punch. Evelyn, the cruise. You are not going on the cruise with us. This is part of the new management's plan. They believed it would be best for the new image if you were not present at the official launch of this new partnership. They suggested that you stay behind, handle the operational side, while we represent the family and the new vision. A sudden, cold silence descended upon the room. The air felt thin, difficult to breathe. My ears rang. They had sold my agency. They had decided I would not go on my own family cruise, and they had done it all behind my back, claiming it was for my own good, to protect me. The betrayal was a sharp, searing pain, cutting through all the confusion and doubt. My husband, my children, they had conspired. They had made life-altering decisions about my career, my financial security, and my family vacation, without a single word to me. They had dismissed me, decided I was not capable of handling the truth, or perhaps not worthy of being included in such important decisions. I looked at Robert, then at Sarah, then at David. Their faces, once familiar and beloved, now seemed distorted, shadowed by their secret. The picture of my perfectly happy family shattered into 1,000 pieces around me. I finally understood. And the truth was far more devastating than any fear I had imagined. It was not just a secret. It was a complete and utter betrayal of trust, of partnership, of family itself. The quiet pain had exploded into an agonizing raw wound. The truth, when it finally unraveled, was not a gentle revelation. It was a violent tearing, a shredding of the delicate fabric that had held my world together. The silence that followed Robert's confession was deafening, filled only with the frantic beating of my own heart and the sound of my shattered illusions. I looked at their faces, Robert's guilt-ridden, Sarah's tear-stained, David's rigidly defensive, and a profound numbness began to spread through me, chilling me from the inside out. My first impulse was to scream, to lash out, to demand how they could have done this to me, to their own mother, their own wife. But no sound came. The anger was there, a hot, trembling fire beneath the ice-cold shock, but it was trapped, unable to find an outlet. Instead, a strange, quiet resolve settled over me. There was no point in arguing, no point in begging for an explanation they clearly could not, or would not, fully provide. Their actions spoke more loudly than any words. I slowly pushed my chair back from the table. The scrape of the chair on the floor sounded unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. My legs felt strangely light, as if they did not quite belong to me. Every movement felt deliberate, almost robotic. I rose to my feet, my gaze fixed on Robert's face. He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate plea, a silent request for understanding or forgiveness. But I had none to give. Not then. You sold my agency, I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. My life's work, without telling me. And you decided I would not be on my own family's trip, the trip I planned, the trip I paid for. Robert tried to speak. Evelyn, please. We thought it was for the best. We thought you would understand eventually. I held up a hand, stopping him. Understand what, Robert? Understand that my family conspired behind my back? Understand that you deemed me incapable of handling the truth about my own business? Understand that you pushed me aside for a new image you created without my consent? My voice was still quiet, but it carried an undeniable edge of steel. I shifted my gaze to Sarah, who was openly weeping now, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, I said, her name a quiet accusation. My daughter. You knew. You were part of this. She flinched, unable to meet my eyes. Then to David, whose face was still a rigid mask, though I could see a tremor in his jaw. And you, David, my son. You stood by and watched this happen. You helped them keep it from me. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of defiance and sorrow. Mom, Dad said it was the only way. He said you were too attached to the old ways, that you would never agree to the changes needed. The words were like daggers, piercing through the numbness. Too attached, not capable of change. This was not just a betrayal of trust. It was a dismissal of my capabilities, my judgment, my very identity. They had decided for me, about me, without me. I looked at them all one last time. There was no immediate resolution possible here. No comfort to be found. The pain was too raw, the wound too deep. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not stay in that room, in that house, with those people, for another moment. Without another word, without looking back, I turned and walked away from the breakfast table. I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room, and up the stairs. I did not grab a bag. I did not gather any belongings. I just walked, leaving behind the shattered pieces of my family and the suffocating atmosphere of their deceit. I walked into my bedroom, closed the door softly, and knew that a line had been crossed. I needed to step back, emotionally and physically, from everything I had known. The distance felt like the only way to breathe. I walked away from the breakfast table, from their stunned silence, and from the shattered remains of my perfect family picture. The act of walking away felt strangely liberating, a stark contrast to the crushing weight of the truth. Yet, as I closed the bedroom door behind me, the immediate sense of escape quickly dissolved, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. I had left them behind, but the pain, sharp and relentless, had followed me. I did not scream. I did not cry. Not then. The tears seemed to have dried up, leaving behind a raw, burning sensation in my eyes. I simply stood in the middle of my bedroom, the room that had always been my sanctuary, now feeling unfamiliar and cold. The familiar objects around me, my books, a small vase of dried flowers, a framed photograph of Robert and me from our wedding day, all seemed to mock me. They were relics of a past that now felt like a cruel deception. The pain was not just emotional, it was physical. A dull ache settled behind my eyes, and a tight band seemed to constrict my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. My stomach churned, a constant knot of nausea. It was the physical manifestation of a broken heart, a body reacting to the unbearable weight of betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed, my gaze fixed on nothing in particular. My mind, usually so active and planning, felt strangely blank, then suddenly chaotic, replaying every moment of the revelation. Sold my agency. You are not going on the cruise. The words echoed in my head, each one a hammer blow to my spirit. How could they? How could they have been so cruel, so dismissive of my worth, my feelings, my very existence? The betrayal was not just about the agency or the cruise. It was about something far deeper, the absolute collapse of trust. The people who were supposed to be my safe harbor had become the storm. The foundation of my life, built on shared love and honesty, had crumbled into dust. It was a complete reevaluation of everything I believed to be true about my most cherished relationships. Hours passed. I did not know how many. The sun shifted outside the window, casting different patterns of light and shadow across the floor. I did not move. I did not eat. I did not even pick up my phone. The outside world, my work, my friends, they all felt distant, unreal. The only reality was the relentless throbbing of the pain inside me. The absence of my family in the house was a heavy presence. I heard muffled sounds from downstairs sometimes, faint voices, but I did not try to decipher them. I did not want to hear anything more. Their presence felt like a threat, their absence a hollow comfort. I was alone, truly alone, with my anguish, thought about the years, all the sacrifices, the unconditional love I had given, the unwavering support. Was it all for nothing? Had I been so blind, so naive, to not see the cracks appearing earlier? A wave of self-blame washed over me, adding another layer to the pain. Why did I not listen to Maria's warning sooner? Why did I try so hard to ignore my own instincts? This was not a fleeting sadness. This was a deep, pervasive sorrow that permeated every fiber of my being. It was the pain of a broken heart, a shattered trust, and a life turned upside down. I had walked away physically, but the pain, invisible and insidious, stayed with me, a constant companion in my newfound solitude. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this pain would not disappear quickly. It would linger, a stark reminder of the day my family chose to leave me behind. The raw, searing pain of betrayal lingered, a constant companion in my self-imposed isolation. Yet, beneath this fresh wound, another, perhaps even deeper ache began to surface. A profound yearning for the past. It was not a yearning for the recent, strained weeks, but for the years before, the time when my life felt whole, when my family was an undeniable source of joy and security. As I sat alone in my room, the house silent around me, memories began to surface, unbidden and vivid. I remembered Robert's warm smile on our wedding day, his hand gripping mine as we walked out of the church, filled with hopes and dreams for our future. I saw us laughing together at silly jokes, supporting each other through life's challenges, growing older side by side. He was my partner, my confidant, the man who knew me better than anyone. Now, that image felt like a cruel trick, a beautiful painting that had secretly been rotting from within. Then came the memories of Sarah and David as children. I remembered Sarah's soft hand in mine as we walked through the park, her innocent questions about the world, her joyful squeals as I pushed her on the swing. I saw David, a boisterous boy with endless energy, building magnificent forts in the living room, his face smeared with dirt from playing outside. I remembered the countless bedtime stories, the scraped knees I had kissed better, the proud moments at school plays and sports events. My heart ached with a deep maternal love for them, a love that felt bruised and battered by their recent actions. I recalled specific moments, small, precious fragments of a happy life. Our family vacations to the beach, building sandcastles, the salty air filling our lungs. Christmas mornings, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and eager faces. Sunday dinners, the smell of my homemade roast filling the kitchen, voices rising, in laughter and animated discussion. These were not just memories. They were the very fabric of my existence, the moments that had shaped me, defined me. The contrast between these joyful flashbacks and the stark, painful reality of the present was agonizing. It was like looking at a beautiful photograph, only to realize that the people in it were no longer who you thought they were. The happiness I remembered felt so real, so genuine. Had it all been a lie? Had the cracks always been there, hidden beneath my cheerful exterior and my unwavering trust? I missed the innocence. I missed the days when I did not question Robert's every word, when I did not search my children's faces for hidden meanings. I missed the feeling of absolute security, of knowing that no matter what happened in the outside world, my home, my family, was a safe and loving place. That feeling was gone, replaced by a cold void of betrayal and doubt. A wave of profound sadness washed over me. It was not just sadness for the present, but a deep grief for the past that was now irrevocably tainted. The memories, once a source of comfort, now brought a new kind of pain, a yearning for something lost, something that could never be reclaimed in its original, pure form. I knew that even if some form of reconciliation were possible, the innocence was gone. The perfect family picture was shattered forever. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the bittersweet images, but they persisted, a relentless slideshow of happier times. Each memory was a reminder of what I had and what I had lost. The pain stayed, yes, but now it was layered with a deep, mournful longing for a past that was beautiful, innocent, and now, undeniably, gone. It was a loneliness that extended beyond the present moment, a loneliness for a time that had passed away, taking with it a piece of my heart. The profound sadness and the intense longing for the past lingered, but a tiny voice within me, born of resilience, began to whisper. I could not stay in this solitary anguish forever. The silence of my room, once a temporary refuge, was slowly becoming a prison. I needed to talk to someone who was not involved in the tangled web of my family's deception. I needed an outside perspective, a kind ear, a voice of reason. My thoughts turned almost immediately to Maria. She was more than just a colleague. She was a true friend. Her quiet observation, her gentle warning days earlier, now felt like a lifeline. She had sensed my distress even before I fully acknowledged it myself. Maria possessed a quiet wisdom, a calm strength that I desperately needed to lean upon. Gathering every ounce of courage, I picked up my phone. My fingers hovered over Maria's contact name for a moment. What would I say? How could I explain the monumental betrayal without shattering the image of my family that I had always presented? The shame was a bitter taste in my mouth. Yet, the need for connection, for understanding, outweighed the fear of exposure. I dialed her number. It rang once, then twice. My heart pounded. Then Maria's warm voice answered, "Evelyn, is everything all right? I was just thinking about you." Her simple words, filled with genuine concern, nearly brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Maria," I managed, my voice a little shaky. No, everything is not all right. I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" She did not hesitate. "Of course, Evelyn. Are you at home? I can come over. Or we can meet for coffee, whatever you prefer." Could you come here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I did not feel strong enough to venture out, to face the world. "I will be there in 20 minutes, she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "Do not worry about a thing." True to her word, Maria arrived swiftly. When I opened the door, her eyes, filled with compassion, immediately took in my disheveled appearance, the redness around my eyes, the slump of my shoulders. She did not need words. She simply stepped inside and embraced me. A warm, comforting hug that I desperately needed. It was a silent acknowledgement of my pain, a gesture of unwavering support. We sat in my living room, the same room where I had silently watched the rain and mourned my past. Maria listened, patiently, intently, as I recounted the entire story. I spoke slowly at first, haltingly, the words catching in my throat. But as I continued, the dam broke. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, the profound sense of betrayal, it all poured out. I told her about Robert's confession, about Sarah and David's complicity, about the sale of my agency, about being left off the cruise. I told her how hollow and betrayed I felt. Maria did not interrupt. She did not offer quick solutions or platitudes. She simply listened, her gaze steady, her presence a solid anchor in my stormy emotional sea. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse, my chest aching, she reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "Evelyn," she said, her voice soft but clear. "What they did was wrong. Deeply wrong. No wife, no mother, deserves to be treated that way. And you are not imagining it. This is a profound betrayal of trust." Her validation was a balm to my raw soul. To hear someone else, an objective, trusted friend, confirm the injustice of my situation was incredibly powerful. It lifted a heavy weight of self-doubt and shame that I had unknowingly carried. "It is not your fault, Evelyn," she continued. "You trusted the people you loved. That is a strength, not a weakness. Their actions are a reflection of their own choices, not of your worth." We talked for hours. Maria shared stories of resilience, of women who had faced similar betrayals and found a way to rebuild their lives. She did not sugarcoat the pain, but she offered hope, a gentle reminder that this was not the end, but perhaps a difficult, painful beginning. Her words, spoken with such kindness and understanding, slowly began to soothe the agitated chaos in my mind. The isolation I had felt began to recede, replaced by a fragile sense of connection. Trust, which had been so brutally shattered by my family, slowly, gently, began to return, through the unwavering support of a true friend. It was a long road, but for the first time in days, I felt a faint glimmer of healing. Maria's visit was a lifeline, a desperately needed anchor in the stormy sea of my emotions. Her unwavering support and clear-eyed validation slowly began to mend the raw edges of my pain. I felt a subtle shift, a quiet strengthening within me. The profound sadness still lingered, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the suffocating feeling of isolation had lessened. I was no longer entirely alone in my anguish. As the days turned into a week, I found myself thinking more clearly, no longer trapped in the relentless cycle of questions and self-blame. Maria encouraged me to think about what I needed, what steps I could take for myself. She reminded me that while the pain of betrayal was immense, I still had agency. I still had choices. One afternoon, a thought solidified in my mind, stark and undeniable. To truly begin healing, to move forward from this devastating blow, I needed to consciously let go of something, not of my love for my children, perhaps not even for Robert entirely, but of the version of my family, the version of my life, that had just been shattered. I needed to say goodbye to a dream, to a memory, to an expectation that could no longer exist. This was not an easy decision. It felt like tearing away a part of my own history, a piece of my own heart. But I knew deep down that holding on to the shattered fragments of that perfect family picture would only prevent me from building something new, something real. I thought about the cruise they were taking without me. It was not just a vacation. It was a symbol of our shared plans, of our family togetherness, and now, a symbol of their betrayal. I had spent countless hours planning it, imagining every detail, every joyful moment we would share. Now it was a painful reminder of what they had taken from me, not just the trip itself, but my participation, my inclusion. I walked to my home office, a place I had avoided since the revelation. On my desk, Still lying open was the original cruise brochure, filled with vibrant pictures of crystal-clear waters and smiling families. It was the very brochure we had pored over together, imagining our time on board. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. I did not rip it. I did not burn it. Instead, I simply picked it up, looked at the images, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of the disappointment, the profound sense of loss. I remembered the excitement in Robert's voice when we first talked about it, the children's eagerness. Was it all an act? Or had their intentions shifted, subtly, insidiously over time? A few tears finally escaped, quiet and mournful, as I acknowledged the death of that dream. It was a dream of family togetherness, of shared adventure, a dream they had chosen to pursue without me. This was the moment for acceptance. This was the moment to let go of the idealized version of what we were supposed to be. I closed the brochure, gently. I did not throw it away. Instead, I placed it carefully into an old, empty box on a high shelf in my closet, a place where I kept old mementos that were no longer part of my active life. It was a symbolic act, a quiet farewell. I was not erasing the memory, but placing it in the past, no longer allowing it to define my present or my future. I also thought about the expectations I had held for my family, for Robert, for Sarah, and David. The expectation of unwavering honesty, of unconditional inclusion, of being their equal partner. I had to let go of those expectations, at least in their previous form. The trust was broken. It would take time, and perhaps different actions from them, for it to ever be rebuilt. Saying goodbye was not easy. It was a painful, deliberate act of emotional separation. But as I closed that box and placed it on the shelf, I felt a tiny shift, a loosening of the tight knot in my chest. It was a subtle sense of release, a quiet surrender to what was, rather than clinging to what should have been. I was letting go of the illusion, clearing space for a new reality. And with that goodbye, I realized, perhaps for the first time in weeks, that I was truly alone now, in a profound and unexpected way. The act of saying goodbye to the shattered dream of my family's past, to the idealized version of my life, was a painful but necessary step. It was a shedding of old skin, a deliberate cutting of ties to expectations that could no longer be met. As I placed the cruise brochure into the box, a profound silence enveloped me. It was not just the quiet of the empty house, but the heavy, resounding silence of true solitude. I was alone now, in a way I had never truly been before. For decades, my life had been intertwined with others. First, with my parents and siblings, then with Robert, and later, with Sarah and David. Every decision, every plan, every joyful moment seemed to involve someone else. My identity was deeply woven into my roles: wife, mother, colleague, friend. Now, suddenly, those primary roles felt profoundly altered, some even severed. Robert was a stranger, my children, complicit. The feeling of being part of a unified whole had dissolved, leaving behind a stark awareness of my individual self, standing unmoored. This aloneness was not just physical, it was an emotional state. I was not just in an empty house. I was in an empty space within myself, where the comfort of shared life used to reside. There was no one to consult, no one to share a casual thought with, no one to offer an immediate word of comfort or understanding. The silence stretched, sometimes comforting in its stillness, but more often, vast and echoing, filled with the reverberations of my own thoughts. I found myself performing daily tasks with a new, quiet awareness of my singular existence. Making breakfast for one. Drinking tea alone by the window, not anticipating Robert's presence. Walking through the garden, no longer planning shared projects, but simply tending to the plants for my own sake. My routine, once a comforting structure, now felt like a stark reminder of my solitude. There were moments, of course, when the loneliness felt overwhelming. The quiet evenings, when I used to sit with Robert, talking about our day, now felt hollow. The empty chairs at the dining table, once filled with laughter, now stood as silent sentinels of a missing presence. A wave of sadness would wash over me, a yearning for the familiar warmth of connection, for the comfort of simply knowing someone else was there, truly there, with me. But amidst the sadness, a different feeling also began to emerge, subtle at first, then growing stronger. It was a quiet strength. It was the realization that while I was alone, I was also incredibly resilient. I was breathing. I was functioning. I was facing this immense pain, and I was still standing. I was not collapsing. I was not broken beyond repair. This solitude, though painful, forced me to confront myself, truly deeply. There were no distractions, no one else's needs to prioritize, no expectations to fulfill except my own. I began to hear my own thoughts more clearly, to feel my own emotions without the filter of external judgment. I started to understand what I wanted, what I needed, separate from the roles I had always played. It was a strange dichotomy, immense loneliness coexisting with a nascent sense of self-discovery. The silence that had once felt oppressive now sometimes offered clarity. The stillness allowed for reflection, a slow, gentle turning inward. I began to realize that being alone did not necessarily mean being weak or helpless. It meant being fully responsible for myself, for my own healing, for my own path forward. The path ahead was uncertain. I did not know what my family would do next, or what my relationship with them would become. But in this quiet, solitary space, I began to sense a new kind of power, a power born not of external relationships, but of internal resilience. I was alone now, yes, but I was also learning to stand on my own 2 feet, stronger than I had ever been before. And as I looked at my reflection, I realized something profound. I was not the same woman I had been a few weeks ago. The profound realization that I was alone now had slowly, subtly, given way to another understanding. I was not the same Evelyn I had been before the betrayal. The woman who had believed so implicitly in her perfect family, who had navigated life with a gentle predictability, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone forged in the fires of pain and disillusionment, yet surprisingly, not entirely broken. The changes were not dramatic or sudden. They were gradual, almost imperceptible. At first, like the slow shifting of tectonic plates deep beneath the Earth's surface, I began to notice them in small ways. My morning tea ritual remained. But now, instead of simply watching the light, I found myself thinking, truly thinking, about my own thoughts, my own feelings, without filtering them for anyone else's perception. I was more present with myself. My perspective on trust had irrevocably shifted. Before, trust was an automatic assumption, freely given, especially to those I loved. Now, it was a precious commodity, something to be earned, to be observed, to be cautiously extended. I still believed in connection, but I understood, with a painful clarity, that trust could be broken, even by those closest to you. This was not cynicism. It was a hard-won maturity, a protective layer that had formed around my once vulnerable heart. I also noticed a change in my approach to my work at the travel agency. When I finally returned, a few days after my conversation with Maria, I found myself more focused, more discerning. I began to review contracts and financial reports with a meticulous eye I had not applied before. The idea that my agency could have been in trouble without my knowledge, that it had been partially sold without my consent, fueled a new determination. I was the owner. I would understand every detail. I would regain full control. This was not just about business. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that had been undermined. My conversations with others also changed. I found myself listening more intently, observing body language more keenly. I was still kind, still empathetic, but there was a new layer of discernment, a quiet watchfulness. I was learning to read between the lines, to distinguish genuine sincerity from polite deflection. This new sensitivity, born of my own experience, with deceit, made me a more astute observer of human nature. The way I carried myself also felt different. My posture was perhaps a little straighter, my gaze a little more direct. The hesitant, sometimes apologetic air I might have unconsciously carried in the past seemed to have evaporated. There was a quiet confidence that stemmed not from arrogance, but from having faced a profound challenge and realizing I had not shattered. I had survived. And in surviving, I had found a strength I did not know I possessed. My emotional maturity had deepened. I understood the complexities of human relationships in a way I never had before. Love, I now knew, was not always pure or perfect. It could be intertwined with fear, with misguided intentions, with selfishness. And forgiveness, if it ever came, would be a long, arduous journey, not an automatic reaction. I was learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions, to process them slowly, rather than rushing to fix or deny them. This new version of Evelyn was not without her scars. The pain of the betrayal remained, a reminder of the fragility of even the strongest bonds. But she was also more resilient, more self-aware, and more rooted in her own truth. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, truly looking at myself, and saw a woman who had weathered a storm, a woman whose eyes held a deeper wisdom, a quieter resolve. I was not the same. And in a strange, unexpected way, this new self, though born of pain, felt more authentic, more real, than the woman I had been before. She was still evolving, but the core was stronger, rebuilt with the unbreakable material of personal growth. The recognition that I was fundamentally changed, that I was no longer the naive woman of the past, brought with it a profound sense of quiet liberation. The immediate searing pain of betrayal had begun to recede, replaced by a duller ache, a persistent scar. Yet through this process of self-discovery and resilience, a small, tentative light began to glimmer. It was not a grand, dramatic sunrise, but rather the soft, hopeful glow of dawn, promising a new day. This light often appeared in unexpected moments, in small, everyday occurrences that, in my previous state of despair, I would have overlooked or failed to appreciate. One morning, as I was tending to my garden, I noticed a tiny rosebud, tightly furled, pushing its way through the leaves. Just days before, during my period of deep anguish, I had seen only the rain-soaked earth, the general sadness of the overcast sky. Now, I saw the delicate green of the bud, the promise of vibrant color waiting to unfurl. It was a simple thing, yet it struck me with a quiet power. Life continued. Beauty still existed. Even after a harsh winter, new growth was possible. Another moment of light came during a conversation with Maria at the travel agency. We were discussing a new marketing strategy, and I found myself contributing ideas with a clarity and confidence that surprised even me. My mind, which had felt so muddled and overwhelmed just weeks ago, was now sharp, focused, and creative. As I articulated my plans, Maria nodded, a proud smile on her face. "That is excellent, Evelyn," she said. "You have a remarkable vision for this business. You always have." Her words, simple as they were, resonated deeply. They were a reminder of my own capabilities, my own intelligence, my own worth, independent of my family's judgment or their misguided attempts to protect me. I also found a small light in connecting with old passions I had neglected. I pulled out my watercolor paints, which had sat untouched for years in a dusty cupboard. I used to paint landscapes, finding immense joy in mixing colors and capturing the essence of nature. For a long time, the demands of family and work had pushed this creative outlet aside. Now, with more time alone, and with a renewed sense of self-awareness, I picked up the brush. My first strokes were hesitant, but as I painted, I felt a familiar sense of calm and absorption wash over me. It was a reminder that I had an inner world, rich and fulfilling, that existed independently of anyone else. This was my space, my creation, for my own enjoyment. The quiet evenings, which had previously felt so lonely, began to transform. Instead of dwelling on the past, I started to embrace the stillness. I read books that had been on my shelf for years. I listened to music that soothed my soul. I even started to experiment with new recipes, enjoying the process of creation for myself, not for anyone else's approval. These small acts of self-care, of nurturing my own spirit, felt like tiny victories. They were building blocks, slowly, reconstructing my inner world, making it a place of peace and quiet joy. The light was not bright or blinding. It did not erase the pain, nor did it magically solve all my problems. But it was there, a persistent flicker, a quiet affirmation that life held beauty, that I held strength, and that new possibilities existed. It was the realization that even in the aftermath of a profound betrayal, hope could still take root. It was a subtle shift from despair to acceptance, from anger to a quiet determination. And with this small light, I felt a gentle stirring, a readiness to begin again, to build a new chapter, not just for survival, but for growth. The small light I had discovered, that faint flicker of hope amidst the lingering pain, was more than just a fleeting moment of solace. It was a catalyst. It urged me forward, gently but persistently, nudging me towards action. I recognized that, sitting in passive reflection, while necessary for healing, could not be my permanent state. I needed to begin again, to actively reconstruct my life, piece by careful piece. My first conscious step was to reestablish my routine, but with a new intention. My morning tea by the window remained, but now, instead of allowing my thoughts to spiral into the past, I focused on the day ahead. I started making lists, small, achievable tasks that gave me a sense of purpose and accomplishment. It might be simply watering all the plants, or making a healthy meal, or completing a specific work task. Each completed item was a tiny victory, a testament to my ability to function, to thrive, despite the emotional upheaval. I dedicated more time and focused energy on the travel agency. The initial shock of Robert's revelations had given way to a fierce determination. I dove into the financial records, poring over every ledger, every invoice, every contract. My knowledge of the business was extensive, but now I approached it with a heightened level of scrutiny, a protective instinct. I scheduled meetings with my most trusted employees, quietly gathering information, assessing the true state of affairs. I began to identify areas where we could improve, where we could cut unnecessary costs, and where we could expand our reach. This was not just about saving the business. It was about reclaiming my authority, my expertise, my rightful place as its owner. Self-care, which I had previously viewed as a luxury, became a necessity. I made sure to take long walks in the park, enjoying the fresh air and the simple beauty of nature. I rediscovered my love for cooking, experimenting with new recipes, savoring the process and the delicious results, not for anyone else, but purely for my own enjoyment. I started a regular exercise routine, finding that the physical exertion helped to release the pent-up emotional tension. These acts were not about pampering. They were about nurturing my body and mind, rebuilding my energy reserves, and reminding myself that I deserved care and attention. My interactions with Maria also became a cornerstone of my new beginning. We spoke almost daily, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes for longer conversations. She continued to offer unwavering support, practical advice, and gentle encouragement. She reminded me of my strengths, celebrated my small triumphs, and provided a safe space for me to express my lingering pain without judgment. Her friendship was an invaluable gift, a tangible connection in a world that had felt so disconnected. Also began to reconnect with other friends. Carefully, cautiously, I started with those I felt most comfortable with, sharing only what I was ready to share. It was a slow process of rebuilding my social circle, but each interaction, each shared laugh or quiet conversation, felt like a small step out of isolation and back into the wider world. I was not rushing the process. I understood that healing was not linear, that there would be good days and difficult days, but I was actively choosing to move forward. I was planting new seeds, metaphorically and literally, in my garden and in my life. I was creating new routines, engaging in activities that brought me genuine joy, and focusing on what I could control. It was a deliberate, courageous act of starting over, of laying down the foundations for a future built on my own terms, empowered by my own strength. I was beginning again, not as the woman who was left behind, but as the woman who was building a new, stronger path for herself. The process of beginning again, of rebuilding my life piece by piece, was a slow and deliberate one. I was finding strength in new routines, in reclaiming my agency, and in the unwavering support of my friend, Maria. Just as I felt a fragile sense of balance returning, a new challenge emerged, one that threatened to disrupt the quiet progress I had made. Robert tried to re-enter my world. It began with small attempts. A text message, short and generic. "Hope you are well." I did not respond. Then, a few days later, an email, slightly longer, expressing concern for my well-being and mentioning the children. I still did not respond. The silence was my shield, my way of creating the necessary distance for my own healing. I knew that engaging too soon would only pull me back into the emotional turmoil I was slowly climbing out of. Then, he started showing up. First, it was at my office, the travel agency. He would appear in the late afternoon, just as I was preparing to leave. He would stand awkwardly by my desk, offering a strained smile. "Evelyn," he would say, his voice softer than usual, almost tentative. "I just wanted to see how you were doing, and perhaps talk." My response was polite but firm. "Robert, I am busy. As you can see, I am working." I kept my tone professional, devoid of the emotion that still swirled beneath the surface. I would continue to sort papers or type on my computer, creating a wall of activity. He would linger for a few minutes, then, seeing my unyielding demeanor, he would eventually leave, his shoulders slumping. His attempts escalated. He started sending gifts, small items I usually enjoyed, a particular type of tea, a book by an author I liked. Each item was a reminder of the man he once was, the man who knew my preferences, who understood me. But these gestures felt hollow now, contaminated by the recent betrayal. I would place them in a cupboard, untouched. They felt like attempts to buy his way back into my good graces, rather than genuine expressions of remorse. He even tried to use Sarah and David as intermediaries. Sarah called me one evening, her voice choked with tears. "Mom, Dad is so upset. He misses you. He says he wants to make things right. Can you please just talk to him?" David sent a similar text, urging me to reconsider, to give him a chance. Their pleas, though born of their own distress, felt like another form of manipulation, another attempt to pressure me into a reconciliation I was not ready for. My heart ached for my children, caught in the middle of this painful situation. But I knew I could not allow their sadness to dictate my boundaries. I had to protect my own fragile healing. I spoke to Sarah gently, but clearly. "Sarah, I understand this is difficult for you, but your father's actions, and your own, have caused me deep pain. I need space to heal. This is not something that can be fixed with a simple conversation right now. The tension between us was palpable. Robert's persistence, his continued presence, even from a distance, created a new layer of stress. I felt a constant vigilance, a need to be on guard. Part of me, the old Evelyn, felt a flicker of the desire for reconciliation, a yearning for the comfort of the familiar. But the new Evelyn, the one forged in pain and self-discovery, knew that true reconciliation could not happen without genuine accountability, without a profound understanding of the depth of the hurt he had caused. He continued to try, his efforts increasing in frequency and intensity. Each time, I felt a familiar tension rise in my chest. He was trying to come back, to undo the damage, but I was not sure he truly understood what he had broken. And I was not sure I was ready to let him back in, not until I was stronger, surer of my own path. The hesitation was real. The decision was mine alone, and I knew I was different now. Robert's persistent attempts to re-enter my life, though initially unsettling, became an unexpected test of my newfound strength. The old Evelyn might have immediately succumbed to the pressure, the yearning for comfort, the desire to restore the familiar peace. But the new Evelyn, forged in the fires of betrayal and quiet resilience, responded with a maturity and self-awareness that surprised even me. Each time he appeared at the agency, or sent a message, or had the children reach out, I felt the familiar tension rise. My stomach would tighten, and my heart would quicken its pace. But instead of letting these emotions control me, I observed them. I acknowledged the pain, the lingering hurt, and even the flicker of longing for what once was. Yet, I did not allow these feelings to dictate my actions. My response to Robert was consistent, polite, firm, and emotionally detached. When he tried to engage in small talk, I would steer the conversation back to business, or simply state my unavailability. My voice remained even, my gaze steady, refusing to waver or show the vulnerability he might have expected. I was not being cruel. I was being protective of my own healing process. I understood that giving him an opening, however small, would be like reopening a wound that was still trying to scab over. I realized that my previous pattern had often been to prioritize others' comfort over my own. I had been a peacemaker, often absorbing emotional discomfort to maintain harmony. But the betrayal had shattered that old pattern. I learned that maintaining my own emotional well-being was not selfish. It was essential for my survival and growth. I was learning to set boundaries, not just with Robert, but with the children too, explaining to them that my need for space was about my own healing, not a punishment for them. This new self-awareness extended beyond my interactions with Robert. I began to notice how I responded to challenges at work. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the financial issues at the travel agency, I approached them with a calm, analytical mind. I researched new market strategies, negotiated with vendors, and made tough decisions that I might have previously hesitated to make. My colleagues, especially Maria, observed this change. "You are truly leading, Evelyn," Maria remarked one day, a genuine admiration in her eyes. "You have a strength I have not seen in you before." I was also different in my personal life. The creative pursuits I had rediscovered, like painting and cooking, brought me a quiet joy that was entirely my own. It was a self-generated happiness, not dependent on external validation or the presence of others. I cherished my solitude, finding peace in the quiet moments, rather than fearing them. I had learned to be comfortable in my own company, to find fulfillment within myself. The desire for external approval, which had subtly influenced many of my past decisions, had lessened significantly. I was less concerned with how others perceived me, and more focused on living authentically, in alignment with my own values. This was a profound shift. The woman who had once worried about being too much or not enough was now simply herself, unapologetically. Robert's attempts to reconcile, though they caused a ripple in my newfound calm, ultimately reinforced how much I had changed. He was still operating under the assumption that I was the same woman he had left behind, the one who would easily forgive and forget. He did not understand that the ground had shifted beneath his feet, that I had moved forward, profoundly altered by his actions. I was different now, not bitter, not vengeful, but profoundly changed. I carried the scars of betrayal, yes, but they were now marks of survival, not wounds of defeat. I was stronger, clearer, and more deeply connected to my own inner voice. The past no longer held the same power over me, and the future, though still uncertain, felt filled with the promise of my own making. And with this new clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The realization that I was irrevocably changed, that I now operated from a place of profound self-awareness, brought me to a pivotal moment. Robert's continued attempts to reconcile, to pull me back into the familiar orbit of our past, felt increasingly like a distant echo, a faint whisper against the clear, strong voice of my own inner wisdom. I had faced the truth, endured the pain, and found a new strength. Now, it was time to make a peaceful, yet powerful decision. I needed to choose myself. This was not a selfish act in the way I might have once perceived it. It was an act of preservation, of self-respect, and of genuine love for the woman I was becoming. Choosing myself meant acknowledging my needs, honoring my boundaries, and protecting the fragile new growth that had blossomed within me. It meant refusing to settle for anything less than genuine trust and respect, something that had been so brutally absent in the recent past. The decision was not made in anger. The initial fire of rage had cooled into a calm, resolute certainty. I understood that rushing into reconciliation, or allowing myself to be swayed by guilt or nostalgia, would be a disservice to the journey I had undertaken. It would be a betrayal of my own healing. I needed to move forward on my own terms, at my own pace. I decided to create a clear boundary, one that communicated my decision without further drama or emotional entanglement. I did not want another confrontation, another painful argument. I wanted a quiet, firm declaration of my path. One afternoon, when I knew Robert was not at the house, I went to his study. I composed a letter. It was not a letter filled with accusations or blame. Instead, it was a statement of fact, a clear articulation of my feelings and my needs. I wrote about the pain of the betrayal, the deep wound caused by their secrecy and their decisions made without my consent. I explained that the trust had been broken, and that rebuilding it would take time and genuine effort on their part, beyond mere apologies. I stated clearly and unequivocally that I needed space, that I needed to focus on myself and the rebuilding of my business. I emphasized that I was not closing the door forever, but that the terms of any future relationship would need to be different, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, not on assumptions or hidden agendas. I also expressed my continued love for my children, acknowledging their difficult position, but reinforcing that my healing was paramount. It was a difficult letter to write, each word chosen with care. I reread it several times, ensuring that it was firm yet compassionate, direct yet not accusatory. It was a declaration of my independence, a quiet assertion of my worth. When I finished, I placed the letter prominently on his desk, next to his usual stack of papers. I did not wait for him. I did not want to be present for his reaction. This decision was for me, not for him. Leaving the study, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was a quiet peace, not an exhilarating one, but a deep calm that settled over my spirit. I had chosen myself. I had honored my truth. I had drawn a line in the sand, not to keep them out permanently, but to create a safe space for my own well-being. The future remained uncertain. I did not know if Robert would truly understand, or if our family could ever heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a powerful sense of agency. I was no longer a passive recipient of their actions. I was an active participant in my own life, making choices that served my highest good. This peaceful but powerful decision to choose myself was a pivotal moment. It was a step forward, away from the shadow of betrayal and towards the promise of a new day. And as I looked out at the setting sun, I offered a quiet smile. Not because I had forgotten the pain, but because I knew, deep within my soul, that I had survived. The quiet peace that settled over me after I chose myself, after I placed that letter on Robert's desk, was a profound and welcome balm. It was not the kind of peace that comes from the absence of all problems, but rather the inner calm that arises from aligning with one's own truth, from making a decision that honors one's deepest needs. It was the peace of conviction, of knowing I had acted with integrity towards myself. The days that followed felt different. The air in the house, which had been thick with unspoken tension, now felt lighter, cleaner. My movements were more deliberate, imbued with a quiet purpose. The pervasive anxiety that had hummed beneath the surface of my consciousness for weeks seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a sense of quiet anticipation. I no longer woke with a knot in my stomach. Instead, a sense of calm washed over me, a gentle readiness for whatever the day might bring. Robert's attempts to contact me ceased after the letter. The phone was silent. No more unsolicited visits to the agency. It was an acknowledgement, however reluctant, of the boundary I had set. The absence of his constant pressure was a relief, allowing me the space to breathe, to simply exist without the added burden of his remorse or his efforts to control the narrative. Sarah and David also seemed to respect the space. Their messages became less frequent, less pleading, and more about their own daily lives, a tentative step towards a different kind of connection. It was a painful distance, yes, but it was a necessary one for my healing. I understood that they too needed to process their complicity, and perhaps their own part in the misguided attempt to protect me. My focus sharpened further on the travel agency. With renewed vigor, I delved into every aspect of the business. I identified the hidden financial discrepancies that Robert had mentioned, the underlying issues that had been masked by previous accounting. It was a meticulous and demanding process, but with each problem I uncovered and resolved, I felt a surge of empowerment. This was my domain. This was my expertise. I was not just Evelyn, the wife and mother. I was Evelyn, the shrewd businesswoman, the capable leader. Maria was an incredible support, working alongside me, her faith in my abilities a constant source of encouragement. I also embraced the quiet solitude of my evenings. The empty house, once a source of loneliness, became a sanctuary for self-reflection and personal growth. I spent hours reading, writing in a journal, and rediscovering hobbies that brought me genuine joy. I learned to appreciate the stillness, the opportunity it provided to listen to my own thoughts, to connect with my inner self. The self-care routines I had established became cherished rituals, moments of deliberate nurturing that replenished my spirit. One particular morning stands out in my memory. I woke up with the sun streaming through my window, a warmth I had not felt in a long time. I made my tea, sat by the window, and watched the garden. The air was fresh and crisp. The birds were singing their cheerful melodies. There was no overwhelming sadness, no lingering sense of injustice, just a quiet appreciation for the beauty of the moment. I smiled. It was a soft, gentle smile, one that reached my eyes, a genuine smile that felt entirely my own. It was not because I had forgotten the pain of the betrayal, or because all the problems were solved. The scars were still there, subtle but present. But the smile came because I had faced the storm, endured the shattering, and emerged on the other side, stronger, clearer, and more truly myself than ever before. I had survived, and in that survival, I had found a profound sense of peace. This was a new day, indeed, not just in the calendar, but in the landscape of my soul. The quiet calm of my new day brought with it an unexpected emotion: gratitude. It was a surprising feeling, given the profound pain I had endured, but it was genuine. As I continued to rebuild my life, to strengthen my business, and to nurture my inner self, I began to see the threads of support that had been there all along, even in the darkest moments. My deepest gratitude went to Maria. Her presence had been a lifeline. She had listened without judgment, offered comfort without pity, and provided a steady hand when I felt adrift. She was the one who validated my pain when I doubted myself, the one who reminded me of my worth when my confidence was shattered. Our conversations, whether over coffee or during busy workdays, became pillars of my healing. She never once said, "I told you so," even though her subtle warning had been there. Instead, she offered unwavering belief in my resilience. I realized the true value of a friend who stands by you, not just in joy, but in sorrow and upheaval. I made sure to tell her, explicitly, how much her friendship meant to me, how instrumental she had been in helping me navigate this tumultuous period. Her smile, warm and genuine, was a reward in itself. I also felt a growing sense of gratitude for the strength I had found within myself. This was perhaps the most surprising and profound realization. I had always considered myself a capable woman, but the recent events had pushed me to my limits, revealing a depth of resilience I never knew I possessed. I had faced profound betrayal, the shattering of my most cherished beliefs, and yet, I had not crumbled. I had chosen to stand, to rebuild, to grow. This self-reliance, this quiet inner power, was a gift born of adversity, and I was deeply thankful for it. It was a quiet acknowledgement that I was truly capable, far more than I had given myself credit for in the past. My work, the travel agency, also became a source of gratitude. What had initially felt like a burden, a problem I had to fix, transformed into a powerful tool for my empowerment. Diving into the details, reorganizing, strategizing, and making difficult decisions had forced me to engage my intellect and my leadership skills in new ways. It was more than just a business. It was a tangible representation of my capability, my independence, and my ability to create something successful and meaningful. The challenges it presented, once overwhelming, now felt like opportunities for growth and mastery. I was grateful for the chance to reclaim it, to shape it into something truly my own, unmarred by external interference. Even the pain of the betrayal, in a strange and complex way, became something for which I could feel a sliver of gratitude. It was a harsh teacher, but it had taught me invaluable lessons. It had stripped away illusions, forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, and ultimately led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the nature of relationships. Without that searing experience, I might have continued to live a life based on assumptions, never fully realizing my own strength or the importance of firm boundaries. The pain was a catalyst, a painful but necessary forge in which a stronger, more authentic version of myself had been tempered. I sat in my garden one afternoon, the sun warm on my face, and looked around at the vibrant life that surrounded me. I was thankful for the simple beauty of nature, for the quiet moments of peace, for the ability to find joy in small things again. This was a profound shift from the despair that had once consumed me. I was not just surviving, I was thriving. And in that thriving, I found a deep, abiding gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, and for the remarkable strength that had carried me through. The gratitude that had blossomed within me, a surprising but deeply felt emotion, paved the way for another crucial step in my healing journey, the act of forgiving myself. This was not a quick or easy process. It required deep introspection, a willingness to revisit painful memories, and a conscious decision to release the burden of guilt, blame, and regret that I had unknowingly carried. For weeks after the betrayal, a quiet voice of self-recrimination had whispered in the back of my mind. Why did I not see it sooner? Why was I so naive? How could I have trusted them so completely? These questions, though understandable, were like thorns, pricking at my spirit and hindering my progress. I had blamed myself for not being more vigilant, for not recognizing the warning signs that, in hindsight, seemed so obvious. I felt foolish, almost complicit in my own hurt, for having been so trusting. But as I continued to process the events, supported by Maria's wisdom and my own growing clarity, I began to see things differently. I realized that my trust, my openness, my belief in the inherent goodness of my family were not weaknesses. They were strengths. They were the very qualities that made me a loving wife and a devoted mother. To blame myself for these qualities was to deny a fundamental part of who I was. I sat in my garden one sunny afternoon, surrounded by the vibrant colors and sweet scents of the flowers I had carefully tended. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to revisit the moments of confusion, the subtle shifts in behavior I had observed. But this time, instead of self-reproach, I offered myself compassion. I remembered how hard I had tried to interpret their actions in the best possible light, how much I had wanted to believe in their good intentions. That desire for harmony, for peace, was not a flaw. It was a reflection of my loving nature. Recognized that I could not have known the extent of their deception. I had operated from a place of love and trust, while they had operated from a place of secrecy and misguided attempts at control. Their choices were theirs, not mine. I was not responsible for their decisions to deceive me. I was only responsible for how I chose to respond to that deception. The act of forgiving myself was about releasing the unrealistic expectation that I should have been able to predict or prevent their betrayal. It was about accepting that I had done the best I could with the information I had at the time. It was about understanding that my innocence was not a weakness to be punished, but a valuable part of my character. I spoke to myself quietly, out, loud, as if speaking to a beloved friend. "Evelyn," I said, my voice gentle. "You are not to blame for their choices. You acted with love and trust. You deserve to forgive yourself for not seeing what was hidden. You did nothing wrong by being a good, trusting person." With each word, a subtle shift occurred within me. The knot of guilt that had resided in my stomach began to loosen. The tightness in my chest eased. It was a liberation, a shedding of a heavy burden I had carried unnecessarily. Forgiving myself was not about condoning their actions. It was about freeing myself from the chains of self-blame, allowing myself to move forward unencumbered. It was a profound moment of self-acceptance. I looked at my reflection, not with judgment, but with a newfound sense of peace. The woman looking back was scarred, yes, but she was also resilient, wise, and kind, not least to herself. I was shedding the last vestiges of regret, embracing the lessons learned, and stepping fully into a future where I could be truly free. Forgiving myself was a profoundly liberating act, a final release from the heavy chains of self-blame and regret. With that burden lifted, a new sensation began to blossom within me, a deep, quiet feeling of freedom. It was not the kind of freedom that comes from grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but an internal liberation, a lightness of being that I had not felt in a very long time. This freedom manifested itself in simple, yet powerful ways. One sunny afternoon, I found myself walking barefoot in my garden, feeling the cool, soft earth beneath my feet. Before, I would have worried about getting dirty, or about what others might think. But now, I simply enjoyed the sensation, the direct connection to the natural world. Each step felt deliberate, grounding, and joyful. It was a symbolic act, a shedding of unnecessary inhibitions, a return to a more primal, unburdened self. Later that week, while listening to music in my living room, a favorite song came on, one with a lively rhythmic beat. Without conscious thought, I began to sway, then to move, and finally, to dance. It was not graceful or choreographed. It was simply a pure, uninhibited expression of joy and movement. I spun and twirled, letting the music fill me, letting my body express the lightness in my spirit. There was no one to watch, no one to judge. It was just me, fully present, fully alive, celebrating my own existence. This spontaneous dance was a powerful affirmation of my newfound freedom, a release of tension, a joyful embrace of life. My work at the travel agency also reflected this freedom. I felt unburdened by past expectations or the need to please others. I made decisions with confidence and clarity, driven purely by what was best for the business and my own vision. I launched a new line of specialized boutique travel experiences, something I had always dreamed of doing but had hesitated on, perhaps out of a subconscious fear of failure or a need for family approval. Now, I felt fearless. The process was invigorating, a creative outlet for my entrepreneurial spirit. Each successful booking, each positive client feedback, was a testament to my own capabilities, independent of the shadows of the past. The relationships in my life also began to reflect this liberation. My conversations with Maria became even deeper, more open. We spoke not just about the past, but about our hopes for the future, about new possibilities. With my other friends, I was more authentic, sharing my experiences with a newfound courage, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I found that this honesty deepened our connections, creating more meaningful bonds. Even in my solitary moments, there was a sense of peace that had been absent before. I no longer felt the oppressive weight of loneliness. Instead, I cherished the quiet times, the opportunities for introspection and self-nurturing. My garden became even more of a sanctuary, a place where I could connect with the rhythms of nature and feel truly at peace. The solitude was no longer a void, but a space for growth, for creativity, for simply being. This freedom was not about escaping my past, but about transcending it. It was about recognizing that while I could not change what had happened, I could choose how I lived with it. I chose to live with an open heart, with renewed purpose, and with a deep appreciation for the preciousness of my own life. I was free from the need for external validation, free from the burden of secrets, and free from the confining expectations of others. I was simply free to be Evelyn, fully and authentically. This liberation, born of pain and self-discovery, was the greatest gift I had received. And as I looked at the world with new eyes, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I finally knew who I was. The profound sense of freedom that now enveloped me was a direct result of the journey I had undertaken, a testament to the strength I had discovered within. With each step forward, from the initial shock to the quiet forgiveness of myself, I had shed layers of old beliefs and embraced a deeper understanding of my own being. Now, standing firm on solid ground, I could look back at the tumultuous path and declare, with absolute certainty, I know who I am. This knowing was not a sudden revelation, but a gradual unfolding, like a flower slowly opening its petals to the sun. It was born from the crucible of betrayal, from the agonizing moments of doubt and despair, and from the quiet, persistent work of rebuilding my life. I had faced the darkest parts of human behavior, experienced profound hurt from those closest to me, and yet I had emerged intact, stronger, and more authentic. I knew I was a woman of resilience. The challenges I had faced, particularly the deceit from my family and the near loss of my business, had revealed a core strength I never fully appreciated. I had navigated complex emotions, made difficult decisions, and stood firm in my boundaries. This resilience was not about never falling, but about always finding the courage to rise again, to learn from the fall, and to continue moving forward. I knew I was a woman of integrity. The betrayal had taught me the devastating cost of deceit, and it had deepened my commitment to honesty and transparency in all my dealings. I valued truth above all else, not just from others, but from myself. I held myself to a higher standard, ensuring that my words and actions were always in alignment with my values. This integrity was my compass, guiding my choices and shaping my interactions. I knew I was a capable and intelligent businesswoman. The initial shock of the agency's hidden troubles had spurred me to delve deeper into its operations, to reclaim full control, and to implement changes that made it stronger and more profitable than ever before. This was not just about financial success. It was about the satisfaction of mastering my craft, of leading with vision, and of proving my own capabilities to myself. The agency, once a point of contention, had become a shining example of my personal and professional triumph. I knew I was a woman who valued authentic connection. The painful experience of having superficial relationships within my own family had taught me the profound importance of genuine, honest connections. My friendship with Maria was a testament to this, a relationship built on trust, empathy, and unwavering support. I sought out relationships that nurtured my spirit, that were built on mutual respect and open communication. I was willing to invest in these and to gently release those that did not serve my growth. Most importantly, I knew I was Evelyn, unburdened by the expectations of others, free from the need for external validation. My identity was no longer defined by my roles as simply wife or mother, but by the woman I had become. A resilient survivor, a wise leader, a compassionate friend, and a woman who truly understood herself. I carried my scars, yes, but they were symbols of growth, not weakness. They told a story of survival, of transformation, of a journey from despair to empowerment. I looked at my life, my garden, my thriving business, my genuine friendships, and saw the landscape of a life built on my own terms, with my own hands, guided by my own inner wisdom. The past was a part of my story, but it did not define my present or my future. I was the author of my own narrative now, and it was a narrative of strength, authenticity, and profound self-knowing. This understanding, this deep recognition of who I was, filled me with an unshakable peace. My journey, from the quiet comfort of my life to the shocking pain of betrayal, and then to this profound sense of freedom and self-knowledge, has been long and arduous. It has taught me lessons that no book or classroom could ever provide. Now, as I reflect upon it all, I feel a strong desire to share what I have learned with you, the listener, who has so patiently accompanied me through my story. Life, as I now understand it, is a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, trust and disillusionment. We often believe we know our path, that our relationships are solid and unshakable. But sometimes, life delivers a blow, a sudden twist that shatters our illusions and leaves us feeling lost and alone. When this happens, it is easy to succumb, to despair, to question our worth, to let bitterness take root in our hearts. I know this feeling well, for I have lived through it. But my message to you today is one of hope and empowerment. When faced with betrayal, with the crushing weight of disappointment, remember that your worth is not defined by the actions of others. Their choices are theirs alone. You are responsible only for your own response, for how you choose to carry yourself through the storm. Trust your instincts. That quiet voice within you, the one that whispers warnings or affirms truths, is a powerful guide. Do not silence it. Listen to it carefully, even when the message is uncomfortable or goes against what you wish to believe. It is often your deepest wisdom trying to protect you. Allow yourself to feel the pain. Do not rush to push it away or pretend it does not exist. Grief, anger, confusion. These are natural responses to betrayal. Sit with them. Acknowledge them. It is only by truly feeling our emotions that we can begin to process them and eventually move through them. Healing is not about forgetting the pain, but about integrating it, transforming it into a source of strength. Seek support. I was so fortunate to have Maria, my unwavering friend. Do not isolate yourself. Reach out to someone you trust, someone who will listen without judgment and offer compassion. Sometimes, simply speaking your truth aloud to a sympathetic ear can begin the process of unburdening your soul. Reclaim your power. When life throws you off course, it is easy to feel like a victim. But you are not. You are a survivor. Focus on what you can control. For me, it was my business, my self-care, my own decisions. Find your anchor, your source of personal agency, and invest your energy there. This is how you rebuild, not just your life, but your sense of self-worth. Forgive yourself. This is perhaps the most crucial step. It is easy to blame ourselves for what happened, for not seeing the signs, for trusting too much. But remember, compassion for yourself is vital. You acted from a place of love and trust. Their choices were their own. Release the guilt. Free yourself from the burden of self-blame. My story is a testament to the fact that even when your family leaves you feeling abandoned, when your trust is shattered, you possess an incredible capacity to discover hidden strengths. You can find a new path, a path of empowerment, authenticity, and profound self-knowing. You can rebuild your life, brick by painful brick, into something even stronger, more beautiful, and truly your own. Remember, this is your story now. You are the author. Choose to write a chapter of resilience, of growth, and of unwavering belief in your own remarkable power. Life will undoubtedly present more challenges, but I know, with every fiber of my being, that you too can navigate them. You are stronger than you know. You are capable. You are worthy. And you are free.